Do you think Americans are starting to understand government is the reason they can't afford things anymore? Because that is what drives me crazy. Yeah, Democrats are bad. Republicans are pretty much just as bad when it comes to spending. But people don't seem to vote with their wallet. We have another poll just came out. Everyone knows prices are high, but they don't intend to vote with their wallet. Why?
Yeah. I mean, really, I blame media. About half the country, I think, does understand what's happening. They understand that government is causing it. The problem is that the other half of the country still believes what media tells them. And media it's not really almost a Republican or a Democrat thing. Media is the pro-government party. Government media wants more spending. It wants to cover up what's causing the inflation. So they will try to sugarcoat all of these numbers in the way that works best for the uniparty. And when it comes to inflation, we've seen it. It was Putin's price hikes for a minute there. It was people buying too much on Amazon. It was the boat stuck in the Suez, right? It's every excuse under the sun, except for the one thing that's actually causing inflation. By the way, it's caused inflation for thousands of years, which is printing the money. And both parties want to keep doing that, right? As long as there's ammunition for Ukraine, the Republicans are happy to sign on to any spending bill. It's really a uniparty issue. And in terms of regular voters understanding that, I think that comes down to the media. 80% of the media wants to carry water for more government spending for the uniparty.
Peter, I've asked about the mentality of this before, but I really am curious what you think these people think. Republican, Democrat, doesn't matter who they are in Congress, president. They know these numbers. They know what's causing it. They understand all this, and yet they don't want to stop. None of them want to stop. None of them even want to slow down. Do they just not care?
Yeah, I think it's a problem with our political system in many ways. So if you are running an election and the other guy is promising to throw a party and you're promising to pay for last year's party, no party, we're going to pay for it. We're going to pay off the credit card. Who's going to win that election, right? So the problem fundamentally is that voters do not feel like the spending is real. They don't feel like the deficit is real until they start feeling that, which historically takes a crisis. Until they start feeling that, they're not actually going to vote for the fiscally responsible candidate. If voters are not choosing the fiscally responsible candidate, then it is political suicide to try to go that route. So instead, the parties are essentially doing what voters have told them to do, which is spend as much as possible. Just put it on, either military if you're on one side of it, on welfare, or importing migrants if you're on the other side of it. But there's no space in there for fiscal responsibility because voters aren't demanding it. They're not demanding it, as you say, partly because they don't understand how it works. The media has deceived them. The public education system has deceived them. Partly because so much of it is going, it just goes into deficits. 2 trillion deficit, 3 trillion deficit. What's the difference for the average voter? They don't feel it yet. Eventually they will. And then of course we'll get, media telling us how nobody could have possibly seen this coming. But unfortunately that takes time.
Peter, we now know the interest on the debt has gobbled up half of the government revenue. That is just such a staggering. For the month of July, they gobbled up half the government revenue. Now, please act like I don't know anything, which is not a difficult thing to imagine. Could you explain what exactly that means?
Yeah, so it means that every dollar that you are paying the IRS, 50 cents of that is going out in debt interest. So it's going to Wall Street, it's going to China, and it's paying for past deficits. Never mind future deficits or current deficits. That's just paying for what we've done in the past. The problem is that is skyrocketing. So it's up something like 5-fold since the beginning of COVID. Eventually, it's not going to be 50 cents. It's going to be 100 cents or 150 cents. It just keeps going up. So at some point, that is not sustainable. Something is going to break there. They are going to be unable to raise that much money in capital markets. That then causes a crisis on government bonds. The interest rates on bonds goes up. The debt interest goes up. We've seen this many times in third world countries where eventually they are unable to issue new debt. They're unable to pay the old debt. You get a debt crisis.
Okay, so what does that debt crisis look like? Because it's obviously coming. Only an idiot would say otherwise.
Yeah, I think it's only a matter of time. We have never been here as a country with deficits this large in relative peacetime. Remember, a recession is coming. By all accounts, a recession will eventually come. Historically, if we go by the past 3 or 4 recessions over the past 50 years, those recessions have added about 4 trillion in government spending if we extrapolate. Okay, so the next recession, we are going to be in absolutely unseen territory. At that point, again, if we go back through history, the government is forced to print more money. That means that the federal government issues more debt, and then the Fed ends up buying it. That's what happened with Japan. So the Bank of Japan currently owns most of the government debt. At that point, it's really just a vicious cycle where the government is printing money. Effectively, it's buying its own money, and it's just doing it back and forth and spending it out into the economy. Once you get into that trap, you get inflation that gets worse and worse and worse every year. Now, we got there 50 years ago in the 1970s. What happened in the 1970s is finally we had a Fed chair who said, enough, we're gonna break the back of this inflation. And that was Paul Volcker, and he raised rates to, I think it was 17 or 18%, right? So there were like 20% mortgages, all right? It was very tough. We had 2 back-to-back recessions as a result. But my concern is that if we get there again, we're not gonna be able to get out of there. And the reason is because Paul Volcker, bless his heart, he cost his boss the election. Jimmy Carter got destroyed. I think he won 1 or 2 states against Reagan. So Washington is dumb, but they're not that dumb. They're not gonna do that again. So my concern is that if we fall back into this 1970s script where we're looking at a decade of inflation and slow growth, I'm not sure that we can get out of it this time.
So we're doomed to just death spiral from here? Is that what you think? I know you're not trying to be Debbie Downer, but if the only solution is a solution that won't be implemented, then there are no solutions?
We would, in order to fix it, you would have to have a politician who gets up there and says, we're gonna cut spending by 1/3. Okay, that's what it would take to end the deficits at this point. So they're collecting something like 4.5 trillion. They're spending more like 6.5 trillion. You would have to cut by 1/3. You would have to, I mean, that's a lot, all right? You would have to essentially close everything but Social Security and minimal border defense, all right? It is pretty close to impossible. Moreover, if you suggest that, you are going to get slaughtered in the election. They're gonna go through line by line. They're gonna say, what about the poor children who can't afford their infant formula? I mean, they're gonna go through a list of about 10,000 things that the government spends money on that are sympathetic. They're gonna ignore the other million things that none of us want the government to be spending on. But anyway, that's the game that's played. So if you look at the political calculus of it, it's very hard to see how somebody can come in here and cut the spending. Now, we could fix it structurally. Okay, one idea, Warren Buffett, his idea is that you tell Congress, you pass one law, and that law says if Congress cannot balance the budget, then they all have to resign their seats and they have a lifetime ban from politics. So that's the Buffett rule. I love that one. That one would work, but good luck getting that one through. The other possibilities might be, a balanced budget amendment where Congress has to balance the budget every single year. Again, that's been tried many times. For obvious reasons, Congress doesn't want to play ball because they love spending all that money. That's the reason they come to work. It's the reason they get political donations. It's why they're there in the first place. So really, you would either need some kind of structural change like that, or you would need some kind of maverick to come in there and actually say, we're going to slash spending. For that, I think in both cases, realistically, our best odds are if we get a crisis, then voters are ready for change. That's what happened with Ronald Reagan. Media, did the same game on him as they did on Trump. They said he's a radical, he's going to destroy the country, he's crazy, he's going to start World War III. Exact same playbook as they do today. But guess what? Americans were desperate enough in the 1970s that they said, enough, we need somebody new. Now, Ronald Reagan did not cut spending, it's true, but he did grow the economy so that the economy could end up growing into the debt. That's probably the best case scenario.